Does it hurt the freedom of speech that there are pockets in New Jersey, not Rutgers, which is owned by the government, theoretically, maybe Rutgers is worse, I don't know, where free speech is not tolerated because it will harm the sensibilities of the youngsters who might hear it, Bruce Rosen?
It's way beyond that. We're now into trigger warnings for Greek classics. The PC in colleges is off the charts, and everything that you went to college for is now at issue because you can no longer have the dialogues that you need to get to the next place in terms of public expression and development of ideas. It's turned into a mockery of the First Amendment.
Professor Waldron, you teach at one of the great universities in the world, NYU. Are there speech codes there? Can a human being be punished by the administration, not by the government or by the Talmudic authorities, but by the university, for uttering certain words or phrases deemed to be harmful to the listener?
I don't know the speech codes, but I'm sure the answer is yes. I'm sure the answer is that if I were to stand up and use a racial epithet, use it, not mention it, use it to refer to one of my students. If I were to stand up and to disparage using some filthy language a particular subclass of my students, yeah, I'd probably be on the way out.
Is it wise to insulate children in their formative years, not even children anymore, teenagers, young adults, from language which, if they went one block from NYU, in any direction, they would
100 yards.
All right, they would freely hear.
No, it's not wise to do that, and it's not a matter of insulating them from certain language. It's a matter of maintaining a professional atmosphere in a classroom as in a courtroom. There are certain things that you may not say in the courtroom, even if it's your turn to speak. And it's a matter of demeanor, it's a matter of respect, and it's a matter of professionalism. Now, having said that, I agree with Bruce, this has gotten way out of hand, but if we're going to go back in the other direction, we go back to a baseline of respect and professionalism.
Dr. Yaffa, if we're talking about Yeshiva University instead of NYU, would there be a justification for the banning of certain words or phrases, whether harmful, whether palpably harmful or not, whether creating a clear and present danger or not, but because the author of the regulation deemed them, I'll use Professor Waldron's phrase, unprofessional in an academic environment?
I didn't attend Yeshiva University, but I can tell you that all the yeshivot, all the academies, both for young people and where great jurists discussed, all arguments are acceptable. The most utter and complete dismissiveness of your ideas is acceptable, and without that, there can be no open discussion. I can tell you that as it appears in the Talmud, that may your Creator forgive you for ever thinking such ideas. This appears in Tractate Sanhedrin. But there is an absolute proscription against personal insult, slurs because you're a Babylonian and not an Israeli, and so on and so forth. And the reason for this is, again, this is not the street. This is not the fundamental rights. It is a privilege to be part of the academy, and there exists therefore an obligation to behave with a decorum that allows for exchange of ideas without it degenerating into a playground brawl.
Do you accept that, Bruce Rosen?
I think that society has degenerated in such a way that natural respect or the natural ability to accept other ideas is gone.
How about in a university like Rutgers? I don't mean to pick on it; they have their own problems, which is owned by the government.
Well, isn't that
which
the
is
same
regulated by the First Amendment? We're not talking about
60s,
Yeshiva or Princeton. We're talking about the government.
Didn't Rutgers fire a professor for being a communist?
Eugene Genovese, right. I think he called for a victory by the North Vietnamese. It actually was a part of the great gubernatorial election involving Governor Hughes the last time he ran and won. But should a school owned by the government have the same ability to restrict speech in the interest of professional academic environment, whatever you want to call it, that a private institution has?
I think universities should be treated, I mean, there are laws and rules as as entities of the state. Certain universities have different standards, and there are different vulnerabilities in terms of the First Amendment. The University of California I don't agree with it.
Are you wearing that T-shirt now or not?
No. University of California just 2 weeks ago issued a brand new rules, basically restricting speech on campus. And I don't see how. I love to be involved in that challenge, and I hope somebody makes it, because I don't see how, in a government institution of all places, that you can make.
All right,
these
so
restrictions.
today, one of the things I debated in my day job was this incident that happened at ESPN over the weekend at the Ole Miss Alabama football game, where some of the guys from Alabama had a poster about this size, and it said on it, I'm going to tell you what it said, it's offensive, but tell me what you think of it. Ole Miss girls are easier than their football team's non-conference opponents.
That's a lot to read.
So wait. Here's what happened. So the camera caught this thing, and then it went away, and then the camera caught it again, and then it went away, and then the broadcasters blasted it. And while the ESPN broadcasters were blasting it, these 20-somethings that work for all the networks thought it's a good way to get ratings. They posted this sign on ESPN's website, and it was out there for 2.5 hours before the ESPN masters decided to take it down. Is that kind of language acceptable on a college campus, at a football game, where people say all kinds of things to antagonize the opposition? Rosa.
I'd have to say yes, and I say that knowing it's not the same as harassment in the workplace, or it's not the same. I mean, you cannot take a college campus and put those kind of rules around a college campus. I mean, I wouldn't be able to go marching around my campus saying, ho, ho, Ho Chi Minh, the NLF is going to win. You can't, once you start putting restrictions like that, it's one little flick away from a political restriction. In fact, it could be a political
But Professor Waldron, isn't this an easier case because there's no real political idea involved here? It's just either an insult to women, without naming specific women, or it's an insult to a football team. Isn't it easier to suppress that than the political idea of Ho Chi Minh?
Yeah, you could find a version of the First Amendment, or a version, an interpretation of the First Amendment that would make that an easier case. But I'm with Bruce. I don't think, we're not trying to maintain professional decorum in the football stands. And this is a bad taste. It's not acceptable in the sense of being ethically, but it's a bad taste slogan. It's also a stupid slogan. But something can be in bad taste that shouldn't necessarily be a reason for discipline. They do that in the classroom. They unfold that in my classroom.
What banners do they unfold in your classroom?
You would be
Professor
surprised, the banners that they unfold.
Tell us the weirdest.
The weirdest would be about all we like sheep have gone astray, and then they'll put all we like sheep, and they expect a New Zealander to rise to this as a...
Wait a minute, you teach at NYU, the students or their parents pay a fortune to go there, and the kids mock you because you come from a land that produces a lot of sheep?
That's what happens. And again, that's bad taste, and I wouldn't think we would want to ban it.
What is your feeling, Rabbi Yaffa, about whether or not we have gone too far on college campuses with speech codes, with trying to protect an academic or a professional environment, and maybe tie it in with this thing about the poster at the Ole Miss Alabama game?
Having spent a good amount of time speaking and dialoguing with students and others on campus, I should make it clear that yes, this has gone entirely too far, because it chills the ability to engage in genuine intellectual and political and societal debate. It is ridiculous. Again, I should make the point, as much as Judaism hates slander and what we call nivul peh, which is obscene speech.
What is the phrase for obscene?
Nivul peh.
Yiddish or his
It's Hebrew. It means basically the sullying of the mouth. The mouth can do such beautiful things, and you use it for the gutter. But the fact is that even though Jewish law is against it, there are no criminal or civil sanctions because we're afraid of chilling speech. This is an interesting paradox. Going back to the sign, this is not at all an issue for the college or the administration. This is an issue for the parents who raised those boys.
Bruce Rosen, have you detected, I realize there are members of the judiciary here, any chilling of speech or lure towards political correctness in the courtroom?
Well, in Chief Justice Willent's, I happened to be, when I was a newspaper reporter, I saw Ray Brown make mincemeat out of, I forget her name, Sylvia Moses. What he did, dearie, sweetie, baby, and just, that's not hate speech. It's his mother should have brought him up better, but he was using it for a strategic advantage to unnerve her, and he did. And as a result, right after that, and a result of that and a bunch of other things, all of a sudden there's a commission on women in the courts, and if you say those things, you're going to be hauled on the carpet. They are now, I believe, an ethical.
Can you add, and rightly so? Or should that language be available to Ray Brown or whoever's going to say it?
No, I think actually the courtroom is a different place with different rules. And although I also believe a little bit in Al Pacino, when he's banging his gavel in Justice for All, you're out of order, you're out of order. I think there are times when you can raise your voice and say things that need to be said and take the consequences for it. And sometimes, actually, as I've gotten grayer and lost some hair, I've actually stood up to judges in that way and gone a little off to the right of the decorum.
Professor Waldron, would you advise your colleagues at NYU to enact regulations that encouraged open, wide, robust exchange of ideas, or to enact regulations that protected the tender ears from an unprofessional environment?
Okay, so we have a professional environment, and now we're going to have open discussion of ideas. Yeah, I want them to enact regulations that will encourage that, permit that, and protect that. I'd also want them to talk to the class, and if they're going to talk about what rape law ought to be, they're going to talk about sexual assault, if they're going to talk about same-sex marriage, then probably the students should understand that there will be things that they will say that will upset some of their classmates, and they should give some thought to that. The thinking being, am I just gratuitously upsetting them, or is the discomfort going to be productive and helpful in the discussion? Because again, even if you're going to the extremes of some position, you've still got to be professional if you're a lawyer.
Can the court rules properly restrain, we'll just use Ray's name again, Ray Brown, from saying what he said about the late, great Sybil Moses outside the courtroom to unnerve her, as you put it?
No, I don't think that it can regulate him outside the courtroom, not nearly as much as, if he did it in such a way as to...
You're waffling.
No, if he... you're right, I'm joining the butt squad.
Where is that T-shirt? What part of no? Go ahead.
No, you cannot regulate his speech outside the courtroom as far as I'm concerned.
So he can say outside the courtroom what a judge would not permit him to say inside, because inside it would be disruptive. She's going to hear what he said outside.
It doesn't matter if it unnerves her. It matters whether it disrupts the judicial proceeding, and there's been an actual prescription by the judge saying we can't. You'll destroy the jury pool. You'll do this. You'll do that. In some circumstances, it may be warranted, but in general, no. No, I say no.
Why is freedom of speech so exalted in this country, Rabbi?
Well, I don't know any more about this than any other American. I'm not a First Amendment scholar, but the answer is quite simple. If you look at what is going on, even in democratic Europe today, these countries are having a terrible time integrating people who have different cultures, who look different, who come from a different background than the largely homogeneous populations of these countries. The United States of America is not built on ethnicity. It is, and to some extent, all the Anglo-Saxon countries. It is not built on ethnicity. It is not built on religion. It is built on an idea, and the key of that idea goes back to where we started tonight, that we are all created in God's image, we all have equal rights and value, and therefore, the freedom of speech, which gives me the full flower of expression of who I am in a society that somehow includes and embraces everybody, is absolutely crucial, because without it, we're just another collection of tribes all at each other's throats. And thank God we're not, and it's because of freedom of speech.
Professor Waldron, can a lawyer representing a client grossly incorrect politically terminate the attorney-client relationship because of his hatred for the speech and political incorrectness of the client?
In the legal system in which I was trained, the answer is no. You can't turn away a client and you can't terminate a client unless the client has violated very specific
You're
rules.
looking at a person whose reputation is great for defending speech, even though he won't show
Yes,
us
so
the
Bruce should answer
T-shirt,
this question.
but which began by representing truly one of the most intolerable and intolerant people in our society, who didn't bathe for a long time and went into public libraries. I think that happened somewhere around here. Can you get rid of him because he stinks?
No,
Why not?
Third Circuit was wrong.
No, but I want you to discuss what the good professor told us is the rule in the British system, that you may not sever the attorney-client relationship because you loathe the politics or the manner of expression of it of your client. Bruce Rosen.
I believe that you cannot. But if the client is saying, I want to go about things in this certain way, and you believe that that certain way that they're about to go about this is anathema to their success of their case, you have a right to say, we fundamentally disagree on the strategy and how this case should go forward.
Professor Waldron, Thomas Aquinas said an unjust law is no law at all. Can you ethically advise a client to break a law that you and she deem as unjust?
Yeah, you can certainly advise her. You must advise her of the consequences. And you can certainly say that I understand the position you're going to be in. What she wants from me is not to tell her what to do, but to tell her what the consequences will be, and to tell her of various ways of getting around those consequences if you can make an argument to the court that the law was, after all, not just unjust, but unconstitutional. Or if you're going to say that I was disobeying this law because I wanted to bring a challenge, something like that. So the lawyer, I guess, has a duty to the legal system. But I go back to the county clerk in Kentucky. The legal system's got to have a little bit of looseness. It has to have a little bit of looseness to accommodate the fact that people are going to sometimes be in these massive ethical dilemmas about what the law requires.
Rabbi Yaffa, what does the Talmud say about the duty to obey an unjust law, or the duty to disobey an unjust law?
The Talmud would define an unjust law as one that goes against the fundamental principle of ethics, whether as defined by Judaic law or by what we call the universal law, the 7 Noahide laws. The Talmud believes that there are these absolute laws. They're related to the idea of natural law and grotius, but go beyond that. And these absolute divine laws must always be obeyed against human law in all cases and in all circumstances. Indeed, the Talmud goes further to quote Maimonides' formulation of this, that for example, a tax law that unduly discriminates against one group of people, one ethnic group of people, or is administered by corrupt people like the tax farmers of the old French regime that basically attack the weak and vulnerable for filling their own pockets. Such laws that are fundamentally unjust by this universal law are not laws, must not be obeyed, and even if you swear to uphold this law, that oath is null and void in the first place, And the law, and I'm quoting Maimonides, and it echoes, Tom Paine echoed it, that such laws are not the laws of kingdoms. The kings who make such laws are no more than armed robbers.
Have you ever made that argument to a federal judge and found a receptive audience, Mr. Rosen?
No.
To any judge of any court. The law was unjust because Maimonides declared it as such.
I might have quoted some English law, I don't know, but no, not Maimonides.
All right, Professor Waldron, I want you to take 2 or 3 minutes and sort of give us the calculus of your views on the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, sort of your closing argument to everyone here, and then we'll go to Mr. Rosen and then to the good rabbi.
Sure. So the freedom of religion is massively important, and we believe in it for the reasons that the Chief Justice set out in the remarks he made tonight. We also believe, I think, that people have a right to be protected from vicious defamations upon them on account of their religion. So when somebody says all Muslims are terrorists, or somebody issues a blood libel against Jews, we believe people have a right to be protected against that sort of defamation. We are protecting the people. We are protecting their reputations. We're protecting their elementary dignity and standing in society. And I'm just going to be a little bit British and try to hold up for admiration one provision of the Racial and Religious Hatred Act of 2006 that laid down this law that said you must not stir up hatred against people on account of their religion. You must not stir up hatred against people on account of their religion. Then the law said this: nothing in this act shall be read in a way which prohibits discussion, criticism, or expressions of antipathy, dislike, ridicule, insult, or abuse of particular religions and their beliefs. It's not protecting the religion as such, it's protecting the people. Yeah? I mean, it's not an anti-blasphemy law, it's an anti-defamation law. And it's attempting to stop in its tracks the kind of evil that happens when there is religious antagonism in the community or where there is intercommunal religious violence, which we see in countries like India or Nigeria, sometimes in, I don't know, Northern Ireland perhaps. And if you get yourself into that social evil, there's no way back, or there's no clear way back. And I think lawmakers quite reasonably do what they can to avoid that.
Mr. Rosen, your closing argument, and in giving it to us, would you please make reference to that elusive T-shirt?
Well, I think what people forget is, as I started the thought earlier, that free speech is not free. There are consequences, there are blowbacks, but the answer to speech that you don't like or you can't tolerate is more speech. And I know I sound like an ACLU guy that I have been, having been on that board for many years and having litigated many of these cases, but the answer to bad speech or distasteful speech is more speech in opposition. And that's what happened in Phelps versus Snyder. And people were looking for there to be some sort of determination by the Supreme Court that we should have restrictions on speech outside funerals to protect the soldiers. But what happened was almost miraculous. It was so much speech opposing what these crazy Westboro Baptist people were about, that it just drowned them out, and it created an entire movement, and that's what I'm talking about. How do I get back to the T-shirt? There is no absolutes. I'll argue that a little bit, but we are an island here. The United States is an absolute island of free speech. And the problem is that, as has been discussed here before, we've lost the common courtesies. We've lost the ability to hear other people. Media has been so polarized, no offense to Fox, but Fox, MSNBC, any of the others, and because of technology, now people listen to what they want to listen to, and they don't listen to anything else. And while I defend a lot of newspapers, what's left of them, or online or whatever, you no longer open up the newspaper and see lots of things about lots of stuff. So now what you could do is any news source, you tailor it to exactly what you want to hear, and you don't see the other side. And so it's like If you look at any of the comments on any of the partisan stations, all you see is, aren't I right? Aren't I right? Aren't I right? You know, it's horrible, and it's destructive, and it's going to destroy the First Amendment. But in the meantime, what we have is the only place in the world where you have this freedom. It doesn't exist in Canada. You make any sort of racial or ethnic discussion, you'll be hauled in front of the Human Rights Commission. It's the same all over Europe. God forbid you should say something like this any place in Africa, you're doomed. And Russia or China, forget it. So we are blessed. And with the prescription on the T-shirt may not be exactly, but the point is there really shouldn't be any restriction on speech. What we need is more speech.
Rabbi, your closing argument.
My closing argument is that as a counterpoint to this discussion as to what degree of freedom and what degree of harm we should allow, Judaism suggests, and I don't mean Judaism as Jewish religion, I mean it's the universal values that we, as if it were, have held in trust and shared with the world, ask a fundamental question of each individual, as God asked Adam after an unfortunate episode with a piece of fruit. Ayeka, where are you? Each one of us should be asking ourselves, what are you doing with this amazing gift of speech? Are you using it for harmful, nasty, inane, and empty purposes? Or are you using it to educate, to share, yes, to argue, to dispute, to call out, to reveal the venality and misbehavior of those in power, if that's the case? Are you using your speech for responsible and good purposes? And if you are, Judaism demands that we create a society where that capacity cannot be chilled. What about all the horrible, stupid, nasty speech? We should be educating ourselves and each other to understand that the value of speech. An automobile is wonderful, it can get you anywhere, but don't get into it drunk and don't drive like a maniac. Speech even more so. Speech is much more than sticks and stones. We're now approaching Yom Kippur. By Jewish tradition, we know that God can forgive us anything but an offense that we've done to another human being. We must ask that other person to forgive us. 99% of what human beings do to each other in our civilized society, where we're not stabbing each other all the time, at least in this room, thank God. The fact is, it's with speech, and it's with insult, and it's with harmful speech. And as we approach Yom Kippur, we ask ourselves, have we used this capacity of speech properly? If not, reach out to the person you offended. Seek their forgiveness, which means to say, open a bridge, throw a rope, so that you can disagree at the top of your lungs, because that's Jewish tradition. At the top of your lungs, but with love. The best line about all of this is that anyone who studied Talmud knows that no one argues more than the students of Shammai and the students of Hillel. Hundreds of arguments. And what the Talmud says, that they argued incredibly vociferously and with giving no quarter, yet they did not refrain from eating in each other's home and marrying into each other's families. This is the essence of what the combination of free speech, which our nation speaks to, and responsible speech that the universal tradition that Judaism shares with all of humanity has. And I think together we can reverse both the propensity for gratuitous nastiness as well as the propensity to put muzzles on everyone in the hope that no one will be offended, and move forward with basically, please take a moment, you're near Morristown, walk in to the house of study where one day, and everyone's yelling at each other at the top of their lungs, but they really love each other. We should be doing that.
Wow.
Have a great year.
To a wonderful panel. Rabboni. I'm done.
This is the beginning of a...
Beginning of a principle.